If there is something that Togashi is excellent at is creating villains, and within this group is one of the best worked characters I've seen, but I'm not just talking about Hunter x Hunter. Chrollo is one of the best antagonists I've seen in literature in general. Chrollo is interesting from many angles. He has a striking appearance and full of symbols that give us clues to his philosophy. His calm personality contrasts with a group of assassins that we had been told were some of the worst criminals in the world. But Chrollo gives an impression of an intelligent, patient and even somewhat stoic man. A far cry from what you might expect from a shonen villain. But more than anything, Chrollo is enigmatic. Togashi hasn't really told much about this character directly. Almost everything we know about him comes to us in indirect or subtle ways. His intelligence is clearly something that stands out. In this series, it may seem that everyone is a genius, but if you pay attention, there is reason to think that some characters are on a higher level of intelligence, characters like Kurapika, Killua, Hisoka, and Chrollo. I don't mention Jing and Pariston because in the case of those two, it's much clearer that they are geniuses on another level. But back to Chrollo, he stands out in the Spider, not necessarily because we are told that he is the leader, but because all the members seem to have a deep respect and trust in Chrollo's analytical and planning skills. The manga shows us the importance of Chrollo's deductive abilities and the interest everyone else has in listening to his conclusions. A moment that I liked quite a lot was when Chrollo comes to conclusions about Kurapika that he had not been able to think of before, based on a comment made by one of his colleagues. He even calls himself an idiot for not having thought of it before. These kinds of details are what make Togashi's characters so human. But his intelligence is not just about deductive ability. Chrollo is a master of emotional intelligence and uses it to connect with people and manipulate them more easily. Just as we saw him do with Neon. In a matter of minutes, Chrollo gained the trust of the young woman and got the information he was looking for. This talent to connect emotionally with people is very useful considering that one of the restrictions of his ability requires the person to explain to him what his ability consists of. Those restrictions were chosen by Chrollo understanding very well how much talent he has to fulfill them. In addition to manipulating enemies, I believe this emotional intelligence is what allows him to remain the leader of a group of almost unpredictable criminals. Chrollo has been able to connect with them, and there are quite a few indications that several members of the Spider are fond of Chrollo, especially Maki. Chrollo himself mentions that he has created emotional bonds with them and it is not easy to let them go. But, despite having the ability to be emotional and connect, Chrollo also has a very easy time turning off that empathy and becoming a man of utter coldness and indifference for the sake of others. We'll talk about what causes this disconnect from humanity a little later. Chrollo also proved to be highly intuitive. When he first meets Killua and Gon, both are constantly lying to them so that they don't discover that they are related to Kurapika. The lies they tell are perfectly believable and seem to fool the rest of the Raiden. However, Chrollo comes across as less confident than the others, and constantly stares at the young men suspecting that they are up to something. Despite having no real evidence, Chrollo sensed something strange and finally asked Paku to question them again. Killua himself was surprised that Chrollo was so intuitive. Chrollo is in many ways an artist. His life is strongly related to literature. His colleagues mention that Chrollo has a strong interest in getting rare books and we constantly see him reading, to the point that his skill as a specialist manifested itself in the form of a book. In addition to literature, Chrollo also shows some passion for music, although it was only for a moment. Togashi is telling us that Chrollo has knowledge on this subject. Also, his way of dressing communicates a certain artistic sensibility, and this does not happen with all the characters. Togashi likes to make it clear that in this work, the character's choice of how to dress is also a reflection of their personalities. We can see characters like Gon wearing almost always the same clothes and without putting too much effort into it. On the other hand, there are characters like Killua or Hisoka who clearly put more attention to this act, wearing many different styles or choosing uncommon clothes but that represent them well. Chrollo is in the latter category. With his way of dressing we can notice that he has peculiar tastes, and likes to pay attention to aesthetics. That is, again he shows an artist's mentality. This detail that seems unimportant can be interesting once we see that this character is able to connect deeply with his emotions. It is common for artists to be people with a strong sensitivity. In addition to art, Chrollo also seems to be interested in the psychological aspects of humanity. He is a thinker by nature and uses that ability to reflect on the behavior of both his allies and enemies. This is what allows him to be an excellent strategist. He can predict the actions of others quite well by understanding their mental processes and discovering their reasons for doing what they do. When he is trying to discover who Kurapika is, Chrollo seems to enjoy the mystery before him. Now I would like to talk about Chrollo's reason behind the creation of the Raiden. This is not clearly stated in the manga, but I think there are clues to understand why Chrollo decided to create this group and what relationship it has with Meteor City. We are told that the founding members of the Ryodan are inhabitants of Meteor City. Let's remember that Meteor City is an area unknown to most of the world, and those who do know of its existence only consider it as a garbage dump. In short, although millions of people live there, technically that city does not exist, nor do those humans. This condition of not existing can be represented with the idea of a ghost, that is, a soul that in theory is alive, but is generally considered not to exist. You may already be getting an idea of where I'm going with this. The so-called Gene Ryodan would translate into something like the Phantom Troop. And we can already understand the reason for that name. Chrollo and the rest of the spider technically are ghosts, beings that there are stories about, but in most people's opinion, they don't even exist. I will go deeper into the Ryodan in another video, but it was necessary to talk a little about it here to understand Chrollo's motives. Togashi shows us that it was Chrollo who started this group and explained its rules and function to the founding members. In the manga it is seen that Maki did not even know Chrollo until that day, so we can assume that in general it was Chrollo who came up with the whole concept of the Gene Ryodan. This condition in which Chrollo was born is what has influenced all his decisions. He was born in a place that does not exist, and his very existence is denied by the world. Chrollo was forced to feel strongly disconnected from the rest of the world. That's why he has such an ease in killing people without feeling remorse. Only the inhabitants of Meteor City can be considered ghosts like him, and hence he creates strong emotional ties with his companions who live outside the law and outside society like him. Chrollo is annoyed with this condition to which all his city is restricted. That's why he devised a way to show the world his existence. The Ryodan. It is explained that Meteor City is willing to accept everything that the other countries want to disappear, that is to say they receive garbage and waste from others, but the Ryodan does not want to be satisfied with that. They go one step further, and are willing to steal from the world whatever they want. We are also told that when someone kills an inhabitant of Meteor City, the other inhabitants will seek revenge to an even greater extent. Again, the Ryodan are not satisfied with that solution. They do not wait for the world to attack them and then take revenge. They directly go and attack the world because they already consider that they deserve their revenge. In other words, the Ryodan is a miniature version of Meteor City, but with a twist in their philosophy. They do not accept being non-existent ghosts. They prove their existence to the world through their brutal acts. They are not content to receive the leftovers of the world. They steal what they deem necessary. They are a more extreme faction of the city's philosophy. Apparently, the Ryodan are still in communication with the leaders of Meteor City. It seems that they are not on bad terms with them, but they have decided to live in a different way. It could be said that they decided to live Robin Hood style, and they see the inhabitants of Meteor City as the poor and the rich oppressors are all the rest of the world. It remains to be seen what Chrollo does with the things he steals, but he doesn't seem to be keeping them for himself, so it is possible that he gives the proceeds of his thefts to the inhabitants of Meteor City. As I mentioned a little earlier, the respect shown by the other members of the Spider for Chrollo speaks of the caliber of this man. Chrollo proves to be an inspiration to these characters. The relationship they have is not as simple as a group of criminals who want money. Chrollo created the Ryodan for a specific reason, and several of the members of this group found that reason as a motivation to exist. It is not easy to make a group with such personalities work, but Chrollo has found a way with a combination of rules that avoid direct conflict and insubordination, combined with empathy for understanding his companions and allowing them the freedom to express themselves as they prefer when possible. Like when he decided to do the Requiem and kill dozens of people with the reason that it would please his now dead friend, Uvo. I think it also helps the group stick together that they don't really live together or are always together. They only get together every so often when Chrollo has a plan in mind. They can put their trust in Chrollo because he has proven to them that he is capable of accomplishing what he sets out to do. Giving the world the message that the Phantom Troop wants to convey is no easy task and would be impossible without great talent and determination. But Chrollo has proven himself capable of accomplishing that mission and has become a source of inspiration for several of his teammates. This can be seen when they were presented with the option of letting Chrollo die for the good of the group. Some remained objective and loyal to the rules that Chrollo himself created, but there were others who simply could not separate the emotions they felt for this character. These bonds that have been created are a double-edged sword. They keep many members loyal to Chrollo and his ideals, but make them lose objectivity and may break the rules for them. One of the most informative moments about the enigma that is Chrollo is when he has a short conversation with Gon, and the latter asks him how he is able to kill innocents without remorse. This speaks of Gon's naivety and his childish vision of the world until that moment, but as for Chrollo, his answer is very curious since it shows that he is not completely sure of the reasons that led him to be the way he is, and he knows that Gon's question could be hiding the reason for his existence. That little conversation, that more than with Gon ends up being with himself, showed us how introspective he is and how he had already been analyzing those issues privately for some time. As I said, I think the answer to Gon's question would be in the conditions to which the inhabitants of Meteor City are forced to live. Chrollo doesn't exist to the world, he was denied an identity from birth, so he treats the inhabitants of society with the same indifference and can kill them and forget about them, as if they were the ones who never existed. Chrollo's empathy is limited to ghosts like him, to people from Meteor City or the Phantom Troop. Growing up on these terms gave Chrollo certain psychopathic tendencies. The professional killer mentions that he sees in Chrollo someone who enjoys killing, a predator. Although he is generally very calm and rational, he can easily turn into a ruthless man with those he considers his enemies. If we analyze the Christian symbolism that Chrollo uses so much, it could be said that like Lucilfer, Chrollo chooses to live outside the established order. With his talents he could easily have left Meteor City and could have obtained documents that make him pass as someone else, as an existing human. But he did not follow this path, he remained as Lucilfer detached from the laws of God and humanity. He is an inhabitant of a more chaotic world, where there is more freedom but also a greater possibility of evil, and he has no problem in using it for his benefit and that of his companions. This obsession with proving his existence and making emotional bonds only with those who are similar to him creates a dangerous weakness. Chrollo is prone to feel strongly damaged and lose control when his proof that he exists is attacked. That is, when they jeopardize the existence of the Raiden. We saw that he seems to hold a grudge against Silva for killing one of his companions. Although this case does not make him lose control, after all, he is not a fool, he understands that his way of living is dangerous and that his companions or himself can die any day. That is why he created methods to deal with the loss of the spider's legs or head. He is at peace with dying, this is what Melody says, but what he cannot bear, is that the whole spider dies, that is why he is willing to sacrifice his life so that the spider lives, and that is why he is open to receive new members to the Raiden if they manage to kill one of the members. The existence of the spider is what really matters, not its members. The Gene Raiden is the only proof that they existed. This is where Chrollo's worst enemy comes in, the greatest antagonist of his life and his goals, Hisoka. Hisoka killed a member of the Raiden to be part of the group. As I said, this is something that Chrollo is willing to accept. Furthermore, he understood that Hisoka was a special individual even within that group. He also showed above average talent, he could be an excellent addition as an ally. When Hisoka, at last, revealed his hand, and killed 2 members of the spider, we saw a side of Chrollo that perhaps surprised many. Chrollo has lost control, he is mired in a deep grudge, and his thirst for revenge seems to have no end until Hisoka dies. Ironically, Chrollo looks a lot like Kurapika at the moment. For all his talents, Chrollo has lost teammates twice to Hisoka, the first time when Hisoka allied with Kurapika and gave him valuable information that allowed him to kill Uvo and Pakinoda, and the second was more direct, killing 2 members himself. What makes Hisoka Chrollo's worst enemy is that he wants to kill Chrollo, and to achieve this, he is willing to kill all the members of the Raiden, but this is not particularly new. Many people may want to kill the Raiden, as at some point the Mafia tried to do. However, Hisoka differs from other enemies of the Raiden in that he does have the potential to carry out this task. Chrollo recognizes the danger of this individual and understands that Hisoka is a huge threat to the spider, to everything Chrollo has created and to his proof that they exist. At some point, Chrollo told Nobunaga not to obsess over Kurapika, but now he is obsessing over Hisoka. Hisoka awakened that rage stored in Chrollo's heart, the one that, though he always seems calm, motivates him to steal and kill to prove a point. And not only did it awaken it, but it made him go out of control. The Chrollo we see in the ship is the man who was denied his very existence, his identity, his place in the world, and he who is not willing to stand idly by. Through Hisoka's attacks, again, Chrollo sees himself in that situation where the world is forcing him and his companions to be ghosts, to cease to exist. There is a now famous image in which Chrollo orders the Raiden to bring him Hisoka's head, but when the group starts to disperse, you can see that Maki is watching Chrollo carefully. She better than anyone else seems to understand that Chrollo is losing his cool mind and that can kill him. Chrollo's story is a story about injustice. He is the face of sadness when he decides to attack those who hurt him. He is the man who decides to stop being silent and uses the tools at his disposal to change his reality. But it is also the story of how discrimination can poison a man's heart and turn him into a demon seeking revenge. The tragic thing is, during that revenge, that man will hurt innocent people who in turn will become new demons seeking revenge. And that's where Kurapika comes in. But Togashi did not want to stay alone in this cycle of revenge that we have already seen in many other stories. He went a step further, and showed Chrollo that evil is not only limited to the greed of society or the discrimination and neglect of the poor. Evil can also be born for pure pleasure. Hisoka shows him a new way of how the world can continue to abuse Meteor City, He shows him that there are people who seek to harm others for pure personal satisfaction. We'll see how Chrollo responds to this new form of evil, but whatever he does, in many ways, his life can already be considered a tragedy. What do you think of this character? Leave me your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching this video.